All right, so let's move on and talk about the pattern of price elasticity, right? I was just telling you that the price elasticity does not always stay the same over the range, the relevant range of production, the relevant range of demand, right? The relevant price range. It's gonna be different. So let's talk about that. So this is what we call the price elasticity pattern section. All right. So what we know is we know that price elasticity, right, which I'm just going to abbreviate with my lowercase epsilon, my backwards 3, we know that it changes, and the way that it changes is systematic. As price changes, but specifically we're going to talk about, just because it's easier, as price goes down, right? We might as well just pick a direction. But I just want you to know it's not only when price goes down, it's also when price goes up, just when price changes. So at high prices and low quantity, that ratio, that P over Q term, that particular term is larger. It's just larger in terms of values, right? So when we're at the part of the demand curve up here, right? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2. So what is P over Q when it's 8 over 2? That's going to be equal to 4 compared to that same kind of ratio, right? And why are we concerned about this ratio? Like, I guess that's the first question. Why are we concerned about this ratio, right? Well, we know that elasticity, let's bring up that point slope elasticity formula, right? We know that elasticity is equal to P over Q times 1 over the slope. So right now we're talking about this half of the product that makes, and by product I mean the mathematical product, like two things multiplying together, not product like product, good, and service, right? It's very confusing. The product of those two together, we're looking at the first half of it, just the P over Q. And so this same P over Q, when we're at a point like here, which is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 2, right? That same P over Q down here is going to be what? 2 over 7, which is, what is that, like 0.2 something, right? It's low. It's less than 1. It's much less than 1. So it's the fact that literally just as we get further to this northwest kind of quadrant where we're in higher prices and lower quantities, this first half, this first part of the elasticity formula is just going to be larger. And so as a result, at the high end of the demand curve, at the high price end of the demand curve, the demand is more elastic. And what we actually find, and I'll write the graph, I'll do the graph here, and then we'll talk about the other points. But what we actually find is that in almost every demand curve, And I say almost because, again, we're really talking about the relative ranges of consumption, right? I don't care about people's willingness to pay for Xboxes when they're $5. Xboxes are never going to be $5, right? I also don't care about how many people are willing to pay in the consumer demand for Xboxes when they're $2,000. They're never going to be $2,000, right? Like, not in my lifetime. So, like, it's important to keep in mind over certain ranges, right? And so theoretically and mathematically, every demand curve has inelastic portions, elastic portions, right? But what I'm trying to say is that because of the relevant ranges of consumption, some of them may not be relevant to like practical real world applications. But it's still important for us to understand what's going on and the fact that just because, so the main point of this section is just because a curve is flatter or a curve is steeper doesn't necessarily mean that every point along that curve is, if we're talking about flat, is elastic, and if we're talking about really steep, inelastic. So again, it's going to be a little clearer once we kind of do this drawing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So in the middle here, at the point b over 2 and a over 2 of this particular example, the elasticity in the very middle is going to be equal to 1. The points that are above that are all going to have elasticities that are greater than 1, and the points that are below it are all going to have elasticities that are less than 1. So this has to do with the fact that at low prices and high quantities, that ratio P over Q is small. Now, why are we focusing so much on this ratio thing? This is kind of a critical thinking question here. Why are we focusing so much on this ratio thing and so much on if it's larger or if it's less in terms of this identity, right? What's happening with slope as we go from the yellow part of the demand curve to the blue part of the demand curve? Slope? Is it a curved line? Staying the same. Our slope stays the same. It doesn't change over the whole of the demand curve because it's a straight line. That's why we're focused on the price over quantity. That's why we're focused on the first part of the product that's identifying the point slope formula. So it's really being driven by where you are on the demand curve. Are you in the quadrant of high prices and low quantity? You're going to be in an elastic quadrant because high prices, low quantity, price over quantity, it's going to be a large number, right? 8 over 2 is 4, greater than 2 over 7. Questions on that? So again, a lot of the time, we're going to be given curves that are, quite simply, so something that is elastic would be very flat, right? And we would say, for the whole range that we're provided here, it is elastic. And for other situations, we may be given something that's very inelastic. And again, we can say for the whole of that range, the elasticity is less than 1. But as soon as we start to deviate from these edge cases, from these end cases, of having a completely, flat line or a completely vertical line, we have to start really paying attention to where we are in terms of the current price on the demand curve, because that's going to influence whether we're in an inelastic or elastic range. And the reason why we care about that is going to be clear in the next section, we still have a lot to go today. Next section, when we talk about elasticity and total revenue. So there's a reason why we care about what's happening with our product and service. We care about what's happening with the elasticity in the range that we're at right now, because ultimately we're going to, and this is the next part, we're going to try to figure out, does it make sense to increase or decrease prices? Because the elasticity tells us about the responsiveness of prices. And so elasticity is going to give us information about how the total revenue is impacted given a price decrease or a price increase. And again, we're gonna do a specific section on that, and it should be clear in a second here.